I'm Jane Morrison-Ross. My day job is the CEO of South of Scotland Enterprise. I currently chair the Culture and Business Scotland Board, and I also chair the National Strategy for Economic Transformation, Entrepreneurial People and Culture Board, and a few others on the side, but that's the main two. It's really difficult sometimes for organisations, particularly with charitable status or voluntary organisations, to get the kind of skills they need. It can be really difficult to get them on the open market when you're competing with commercial companies. And I think volunteering to be on a board is a really important way of putting something back, essentially. It's also a great learning experience, though. No matter what you think you've learned in your career, you will always learn new things and new skills and a huge amount about people as well by volunteering for a trustee position. I have learned so much by being a trustee. I'm not even sure where to start. The first charity board that I joined, I very quickly inherited the chair post because there were challenges with the previous board and they all resigned on the second meeting that I attended. Not because of me, I hasten to add. And I and the other director that were left had to pick up a grievance process and a disciplinary process and conversations with the union and challenges with Oscar as a registered Scottish charity. And it was just a massive learning curve, but it was a really interesting one as well. And we managed to salvage things and turn the organisation around and bring in new board members with incredible skills. I don't think there's no way we would have learned what we learned in such an accelerated time in a traditional day job. We had some brilliant people in the organisation working with us as well that absolutely made the difference. But that has, over the years, given me so much insight and knowledge and practical experience, I think, in those things that has helped me in my day job when I've had to deal with similar issues as well. I think what surprised me has been the sheer level of commitment and passion and energy. Also, just the ability for other trustees to find time. Um, Everybody's busy, and I know there's the old saying about if you want something done, find the busiest person. But some of the people that I've worked with as a trustee on boards, they're just incredible. You wouldn't imagine they could find time around day job and family commitments, but the role is important to them, so they do, and they seem to make additional time to contribute. So I think that's been a learning experience as well. I think for me, it's got to be something I feel passionate about, or I believe a cause I believe in. And I know that sounds a little bit cliched, but one of the first trustee positions I took on was for a Rape Crisis Scotland Centre. And that was through a friend of mine, and it felt as though it was really important to be able to work with the organisation to see them through a period of change, and to look at how they needed to restructure and modernise to deliver services across a large chunk of rural Scotland. I met some amazing people doing that role as well, from HR professionals to psychologists and experts in feminist governance and everything in between. With Culture and Business Scotland, I've been passionate for a very long time about the importance of creative and cultural industries to Scotland, and how they can really drive a really valuable part of our economy. And I find myself in my day job spending a lot of time questioning why we and other organisations were not doing more with the creative and cultural sectors, why they weren't more included in things like the National Strategy for Economic Transformation, why we weren't really recognising how powerful these organisations are in putting Scotland on an international stage. You go anywhere in the world and people know about the heritage here, the culture sector, the creative sector, our music, our art, filmmaking, all of those things, but we often don't recognise that enough in Scotland. And when the culture and business role came up, it just seemed like a brilliant opportunity to be really passionate in a very focused and directed way. But it also made sense, for me at least, that there was a real intersection between my day job, leading an economic development organisation, and that role helping to shape the future of Culture and Business Scotland and how we bring creative and cultural organisations together with that commercial sector. Being a trustee on a board, I think, is a really positive experience and a very good opportunity to contribute and to shape things and bring a bit of change and sometimes a bit of constructive challenge as well. Stepping up to the chair role, I mean, my first one was pretty much accidental. More recent ones have been quite deliberate. I think that the difference there is, as chair, you've got a responsibility to make sure the board is coherent, has the right structure, has the right skill sets, the right mix of people, the right mix of challenge. But you also have the responsibility of making sure that the board is focused on the strategy of the organisation. And people often say the board has to be on the organisation, not in the organisation. But I do think that's a really important distinction, because if the board starts to dip too far into operational matters, then you're taking the power away from the chief executive and their team. So I think that's quite important, that the chair is able to keep the board focused on the strategic and help bridge the gap between the organisation, the team that's running it, and the board members that are helping to guide and shape the forward strategy, making sure that it's a really positive relationship, an open one, and that there's really good communication, but also making sure that there is challenge when it's appropriate, when it's constructive and needed. I think in my day job, I work with a excellent and very experienced chair, and we've had a rule since day one that we won't always agree, and sometimes we will actively disagree, but we won't fall out, and we will always find a clear way forward, and that's worked well so far. I think as a chair, I'm really keen that the chief executives that I work with understand that I value them and I understand what they are trying to do as a day job, and that I understand the role of chair and the board is that strategic focus. So it can be useful for the chair to assist in keeping some of the more operational uh, tendencies out of the organisation or targeted in a really useful way. And that's where board subgroups, for instance, or special interest groups or short life groups can be really, really valuable and a great way of using board members' skills as well. It's a really interesting place to be, to have that kind of chair and chief exec, looking out and looking in. I think this, my day job, this is my third chief executive role, and I think that from previous roles, there was a lot of learning on what I would not want to be like as a chair. In my current day job, I think I've got an excellent working relationship with my chair. We've got a very open and frank and no secrets policy. But he also trusts me to do my job and gives me the autonomy that I need to deliver for the organisation. I have had, and I won't say which one it was, but I have had a chief exec role previously where that was not the case, and it was a really, really difficult board and chair to deal with, a new chair who just didn't have the experience, and I think really wanted to do the chief executive's job, and that makes things incredibly difficult. So as a chair, I try and be really, really clear that I understand absolutely what the chief exec is there to do, and I am not there to tread on toes or get in the way. I'm there to support and empower, and have their back if that's what's needed, but also to provide that challenge back if it's needed. And I expect my chair to do that with me as well, and they absolutely do. Absolutely, go for it. Absolutely. I think it's a really enriching experience. You'll get to work with people that you wouldn't get to work with in your day job, both in the organisations and as other trustees. I've got to work with some absolutely brilliant people over the years that I'm still in touch with and still in contact with, and are a really important part of my network now. Don't underestimate the skills or the knowledge or the experience that you've got to offer as well, because quite often you'll be working with an organisation in a completely different sector with a completely different focus, who doesn't necessarily have access to those skills, through their own team, because it's not core to what they do. And bringing a different perspective, bringing a new network, bringing new connections is absolutely valuable to organizations, and can help with everything from, new strategic direction, new funding opportunities, and new partnerships as well. So I think it's absolutely worth doing every time. I think as an organization that works in a rural or more remote area, then it can be difficult to attract the sort of diversity that you really want, across the board. There's lots of good organizations out there, Changing the Chemistry and others that can help. It's really important to think about how you're advertising and where you're advertising. For us, the majority of our trustees come from the region that we work in, and the south of Scotland in many ways is a wonderful region, but it's not as diverse as Glasgow or Edinburgh, somewhere like that. We've got a really good gender balance on our board, and our chairs worked really hard from day one to make sure that we do have that. We've got lots of women in senior leadership roles as well. We found it difficult to attract younger board members, and it's a public sector board, so it's quite a rigorous and onerous process for board members to go through. So we've literally just set up and launched our youth advisory board for SOSE. So we have a new additional board that's not set up in the same way that advises our core board, and members of that are aged between 16 and 25, and come from right across the south of Scotland. Some are working, some are in apprenticeships, and some are still at school. But it's really helped us engage, and not just on the kind of young people's issues. We're plugging them into everything we're doing at a strategic level. Other types of diversity and inclusion, I think it's just really important to have that open-mindedness. So, we have a number of employees who are non-neurotypical, neurodiverse. We have clients in the same category. So we're really keen to make sure that when it comes to board recruitment, we are casting the net as wide as we can, because it gives us a much richer board, and it gives us lived experience that we can't get any other way. But you just have to be really mindful of how you go out to recruit. The very first board roles I had, I was really quite young. I sat on boards with a lot of very experienced and well-known people at the time. It was the early days of the internet and e-commerce, so there were some, really big businesses there and leaders from those businesses. And I was quite naive still, and didn't realise that, my opinion might not necessarily be taken as seriously as the CEO of Scottish Power or something. But in retrospect, I'm really glad, because it meant that, I said my piece, and I was outspoken, and I challenged, and didn't know that I probably wasn't expected to. I think one role does spring to mind, and it was, would I do anything differently there? I think I would have done more research before taking up the post, not into the organisation, but into the board that was there at the time. And that will come as no surprise to know that that's the one where the trustees resigned. It would have been useful to be aware of the level of challenge that was coming. I'd still have taken the role, I think, because I really believed in the organisation, but I would have had my sleeves rolled up and been more prepared for the challenges that lay ahead.